Hello, Internet. My name is Chamomile.
And I am the ghost of Sigmund Freud.
My nemesis! You have arrived!
Yes!
Your
Finally,
ideas are dumb!
I invented the field of psychoanalysis. I came up with talk therapy. I may have done a lot of cocaine, but everybody was at the time.
Okay, but I stand by my point.
Look, I was one of the first people to take a scientific outlook of the science of the mind and treat mental illness like a disease. And I came up with talk therapy. Like, if you go to a therapist and you sit down and you talk with them, I'm the one who had that idea first.
That feels sufficiently obvious that I'm pretty sure someone would have figured it out eventually, just as soon as they stopped blaming mental illness on, like, demonic possession. I'm pretty sure your main contribution that, that because we were cursed to live in the timeline where you got there first, was this relentless obsession. I joked about you being obsessed with penises. I thought that I was, like, being mean. And then Requiem was like, yeah, no, that's basically exactly correct.
We see what's going on, Chamomile, is you were projecting your idea of your father onto me, and you were trying to symbolically castrate me by disproving my ideas so you can thus become me.
Wait,
and
so
also,
is that becoming you, like, because you symbolize my father, or becoming you literally?
I mean, it's Kingdom Hearts. It could be both. I have been optioned to be in the fourth one.
I mean, I assume Disney has the copyrights to your likeness.
They do. I'm not even sure how they got it. All psychiatrists are going to have to register with Disney. It's honestly a little worrisome, but it is what it is. But anyways, all that talk of keyblades and keyholes and darkness pouring out of keyholes that summoned me, and you no longer have Requiem to protect you.
I don't
Which
need
he was
Requiem's
doing,
protection.
apparently.
I will throw down with you, verbally. I would offer physically, but I mean, that just seems kind of mean on account of you're a ghost and all.
Yeah, I would definitely win.
So the Oblivion here is going to decrease my mana again, but it is even stronger than Cloud's Keyblade, so it's also the most badass looking.
There's kind of a homoerotic subtext in the fact that the best Keyblade is the one that he gets from interaction with his male rival, isn't?
Dude, are you just now getting the homoerotic subtext? We made that joke in, like, episode 1.
I've just shown up. I'm Sigmund Freud.
I mean, but hasn't, like, Requiem been keeping you back, like, this entire time? Have you not been here?
In spirit.
Also, your powers are weak, old man. Your... See, immediately after equipping the Keyblade of my male best friend, I went inside the same keyhole that his transformed older body went in, and you didn't say a goddamn thing. You've lost your touch.
You've been consumed by the primordial darkness that is the womb. All of us seek return to the womb in the form of the Death Wish. Sora is just a child, and yet he seeks to save the world in a quest that will surely destroy him, and already has. Our two drives are the erotic drive and the death drive, and in Kingdom Hearts we see them both fulfilled.
I mean,
you
Sora
only
is
make me
literally
stronger.
already dead, like he's incorporeal right now.
You've only made me stronger, you fool. Soon I will be released back upon the material world.
It'll never work. If only because your understanding of the death drive is clearly atrophied, and also your understanding of the sex drive is so utterly myopic. You are a failed master of your own dichotomy.
You're attacking a phallus symbol!
Look, sometimes a giant horn on top of a creature's head is just a cigar.
It's a penis!
I mean, honestly, I feel like I've got the upper hand just because, like, I was trying to make a sarcastic joke about how that's totally a phallic symbol, and I couldn't find it. Other than being vaguely cylindrical, there's nothing there. Like, what are the horns, then? Are those also... Is this a three-penised monster?
They could be!
Why three? What the fuck does that represent? Aha! Silence! You are defeated!
You haven't bested me yet. This battle is dragging a little.
Well, we're done with the womb, which means it's time for Sora to continue living despite having died, which is not even the first time that's happened, but...
Now let's go and seal that big keyhole. You did it.
It's time for Sora to complete his unbirthing.
Well, no, see, now he's being de-unbirthed.
Regardless, somebody is getting off on this.
I mean, definitely. And whoever it is, I kind of hate them.
You see, one of the designers tried to repress their sexual desires, but the repressed always manifests itself in neuroses. All the weirdness of the Kingdom Hearts series is somebody's repressed sexual dysfunction.
All you've done is reveal how myopic and Western-focused you are. The designers were Japanese. They aren't repressing shit.
Then why does Squall have 3 belts? Seriously. Why does Squall have 3 belts? I just noticed that.
Because Tetsuya Nomura. You think this is a lot of belts? Wait until Kingdom Hearts 2. Tetsuya Zippers and Belts Nomura is only getting started.
What is he repressing? What deep trauma is manifesting itself this way?
I couldn't forget you, even if I wanted to. What's that supposed to mean?
I mean, so is a belt a vagina or a penis?
I'm not even sure at this point. But you need to go close that keyhole.
Good luck, I already beat the boss. This is the easy part. Why did we leave? Like, why didn't we do this and then go out and talk to them?
I feel like
what
this
you're saying
needs no
here is that we
commentary.
metaphorically entered the womb, destroyed a triple penis metaphor, left, talked to our friends, re-entered, and then sealed the keyhole within the womb, which is not the same as the keyhole we entered through.
Well, you see... See, it's not over. You gotta find the Heart of Darkness. And what could the Heart of Darkness be?
A meditation on how efforts to intervene on the behalf of other cultures can end in disaster and result in making everything worse.
Probably. I haven't been paying attention.
Well, we're going to Kingdom Hearts, where we are going to restore all of the destroyed worlds. And I forget what broody emo name the world bordering Kingdom Hearts gets in this one. The world that never was the Nobody world from Kingdom Hearts 2. I think this one is Darkness at the End of the World, but that might be a Chrono Cross thing.
So what would you say is the first example of a story that involves visiting another world or traveling to another time?
Depending on what exactly you mean by another world, you know, extremely ancient myths could qualify. Like, Ra visits the underworld in his journey, but that gets into the thing that I've spoken about with Requiem before. You monster. Which is that, you know, the Egyptian underworld was not really another world. It was literally just beneath the ground, according to Egyptian theology.
How about getting on a ship and leaving the planet?
I don't know. I assume you know. Feels like something that would have come out of the 19th century.
I mean, you're incorrect.
So...
I need to make sure I'm doing this correctly. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, actually, in the 1500s, people started writing stories about visiting the moon. Because that's when we figure out the moon is a physical thing and not part of the spirit world. So in theory, you could actually travel to it. There was a book called The Man in the Moon, and then a parody written by Cyrano de Bergerac, I think also called The Man in the Moon. Oh, and Aphra Behn even wrote one.
Please don't tell Aladdin about this. The writers would have to add so much more dialogue if you did. Yeah, no Squall's hanging out in the library. I'll go there and hope he has something to say.
In The Man in the Moon, a man gets a bunch of geese, and he ties them to his ship, and that allows him to fly, and at one point he lands on the moon.
Sounds legit.
And Margaret Cavendish was one of the first authors of utopian fiction, and she had a vision of a future world, so it's sort of time travel-y. They call the Blazing World. It's a planet ruled by an empress, and she has basically spaceships, and they launch missiles and stuff. But this is like the 1600s. So she doesn't say missiles, it's like flaming bodies.
That's pretty metal. That's significantly more metal than I expected from someone named Cavendish.
I think the first proper time travel story is Mark Twain, a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court. And then The Time Machine is the first one with a time machine, H.G. Wells' Time Machine. You get into those things where what you define as the start of science fiction really depends on how you define science fiction. Nobody uses the term science fiction until the 1920s when the word is coined by Hugo Gernsback in his magazine, though the way he says it sort of implies that people had been using it before, and he's just the first person to use it in print. Because is it Astounding? I don't remember which magazine he wrote. Hold on. Not wrote, but was the editor for. I'm just really concerned about always being correct in this podcast that no one listens to.
I mean, I have put minimal efforts into actually advertising it now. Like, my plan is that once the Kingdom Hearts podcast is done, I'm going to look into maybe getting some people to actually watch it. So, you know.
Okay. So I think it was Amazing Stories that he writes this article asking people to write in saying what science fiction means to them, which is the first recorded use of the term, but it also sort of implies that people had been using that term sort of in the wider culture, and that's just the first published instance of it.
Right.
Before that, you see the term science romance, which is, there's this whole division between like romance and fiction that we don't really use anymore, where more sort of like idealistic, dramatic forms of fiction are called romances, and then the more grounded literary stuff is called novels. You can still kind of see that divide if you go to like a bookstore. The books in the fiction section are novels. The books in the science fiction fantasy section are romances. But it's kind of not a division that we use anymore, and even in like academia, that sort of genre versus non-genre thing is kind of going out of style. Because you get stuff like magical realism, which is very like literary and is part of the canon, but is not, you know, super grounded in like the real world.
No, I mean it's fantasy when a literary type person writes it.
Pretty much.
And like a Game of Thrones has lots of literary flourishes to it. Which gets particularly annoying when people who have never read any literary fiction read a Game of Thrones and assume that George R. R. Martin, like, invented foreshadowing.
What I really hate is when people say Game of Thrones is like Dungeons and Dragons, or that he was inspired by Dungeons and Dragons when he clearly was not.
Yeah, no, it's War of the Roses fan fiction. Like, obviously.
Like, the only, like, similarities is that it's fantasy, and, like, Dungeons and Dragons is fantasy pastiche, pretty much. But Game of Thrones does not feel like somebody's D&D campaign that they filed the serial numbers off at all.
Yeah, like, not remotely. There's very few fantasy monsters, you know. This guy doesn't seem to be pulling from a monster manual. None of the 7 houses of Westeros feel like they were originally like an elf kingdom or an orc kingdom or whatever and had the serial numbers filed off. You know, they all feel like they were what they were in the final product, which was, you know, human kingdoms in a fairly English, French, German medieval paradigm. Also, if anyone is saying that, like, if anyone is building that theory based on the fact that George R. R. Martin wrote short stories about Githyanki and Githzerai back in the 70s, the plagiarism went the other way on that one.
Yeah. Like, Martin is essentially a contemporary of Gygax. Like, they have the same influences, but he's not really meaningfully influenced by Gygax in any sense. Like, if you looked at a fantasy writer who started writing now, or like 10, 20 years ago even, you could try to draw a line from that to Gygax. But I don't think you can do that with Martin. Martin's 72. He was probably reading some of the same fiction that Gygax was reading, but I don't think he was influenced by Gygax in any meaningful sense. Like, and I've read stuff that feels like this is somebody's D&D campaign. Like, I always felt like the Shannara stuff felt like this is somebody's D&D campaign.
And all these worlds become restored and disconnected. What's going to happen to this place?
And I'm sure there are fantasy novels that started out as inspired by somebody's D&D campaign. Like,
Funny enough, I read a sci-fi YA novel a long time ago, like 10 years ago.
Even if this place goes
That was about like a giant mega prison.
I'm sure we'll find
And
ourselves again. Yep, I'm
a couple of chapters in, I realized this is someone's Carcery campaign from D&D.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, they switched genres from fantasy to dystopian sci-fi. Like, they filed the serial numbers way off. But this is Carcery. It's got a link to the demon web pits in it.
what? Seriously?
There is a culture, an all-female culture of people who live in, like, a little village that is made entirely out of ropes suspended in the air, basically
Oh,
like
boy.
spider webs. And they are extremely distrustful of men.
Do they worship a legally distinct spider goddess?
No, unfortunately, the author of this was apparently unable to come up with that that coup de grace of creative legal evasion. Which, you know, you can see that. You can see that in full force in Dark Lord. Except you can't. Because once again, it's not out yet. I keep setting myself up to shill for a product that I haven't released yet. I'm not good at this.
So what ended up being the emo name of the final world? Is it... What is it called? Final Dimension?
End of the world. Top
Oh.
right is the name of the world. Final dimension is the room we are in right now. Is this? Okay. There's a bunch of invisible walls here. They're super annoying. So, you know, as part of the whole scene left no cultural imprint thing, like, it makes me wonder, was scene anything other than an aesthetic?
It might have just been like a brief like growth out of the emo aesthetic that never really budded off properly into its own thing. Like there's a couple of bands like Broken Side, but like Broken Side is held up as bad in a way that nothing out of the emo era is.
And like, what would a scene name be? And it might just be that I wasn't in high school for that. Like, I was in high school during when the transition from emo to scene was supposed to be taking place. Didn't I just kill you?
I mean, Broken Side and Blood on the Dance Floor are the two bands that I can think of.
Yeah, like, you know, if you were going to have a scene kind of name for something, what would it be? You know, you can think of gothic names.
Blood on the Dance Floor just sounds emo. Broken Side doesn't sound like anything.
Yeah, you know, if it was a goth thing, it would sound very vampire. If it was punk, then, you know, you can give a punk name for things. It's, you know, Rage Against the Machine, Sex Pistols. Just angry counterculture words. You know, a goth name, something about ravens or vampires. An emo name, something about, like, you know, something edgy
My
but
Chemical
tragic,
Romance.
like, you know, yeah.
Panic at the Disco. Falling in Reverse. Yeah, I don't think
XX,
Scene
Bloody
ever properly
Wrists,
budded off.
667 XX.
scene never really properly budded off for whatever reason. But I think E-Girl and E-Boy has, but it's more like video focus. Like, I don't think there's a musical subgenre attached to it, as far as I know. And you also have Visco Girls, which are totally unrelated to any of those things.
Gosh, is the whole E-Boy, E-Girl thing. Like, is that just people who want to be on YouTube? Because that's not nothing, but...
Like, no, it's like it really seems to me like a toned down version of emo. Like, here's the Urban Dictionary definition: E-Boy, a boy who has black painted nails, skates, wears black clothes and chains and beanies, and sometimes have their hair parted down the middle, and they're usually pale. That's just a toned down emo.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's just emo without the...
but there's a lot of, like, TikTok stuff and like that.
I mean, is that unique to their subculture?
I mean, I guess you could say it's emo plus TikTok.
It makes me kind of sad. And, like, I do kind of wonder how much of this is just that I'm not close enough to it to see any of it. Like, because Scene was just emo with brightly colored, with like neon colored hair. Which... Are all our teen countercultures just recycling the last teen counterculture over and over again? I don't want that to be true.
I mean, it seems like pop is very dominant as a musical genre right now. And you also get the thing where, like, the sort of moody, dark aesthetic has kind of been absorbed into pop, because you get people like Billie Eilish, who is doing that as sort of like a pop star. Like, she's singing about being the bad guy and the mom's turned to her bed and jumping off a bridge, and has sort of the same amount of, like, cultural cachet as, like, a Britney Spears did back in the 90s. Like, it's no longer a sort of subculture thing to be, like, singing about this dark stuff. I also wonder if there's a certain amount of, like, I don't know enough about the music industry, but I wonder if if they have the same issue that the movie industry has. There's a certain amount of corporate hegemony that has sort of standardized music and made it so subgenres have a little harder time emerging.
Yeah? And I mean, you know, punk and goth and emo were more than just their music, but I could definitely see that they could, you know, they might have been driven by the music.
Like, I think the music has helped their longevity.
Oh,
like,
absolutely. Like, the music was definitely a big part of them.
Because, like, you will still see people who are identifiably part of those cultures, who identify with those cultures, even, like, young people. It's really just we haven't, like, had a new subculture butt off the way we used to. And you could also, I wonder, like, if hipster sort of ate some of it. Like, that was sort of, like... Because you think of, like, one of the big music genres that happened was vaporwave, which is not really it's kind of like really not what you expect as a rebellious form of music. But it was the new music for a while. It's kind of in a different style than what we're used to with the sort of rebellious subculture music. And I feel like hipsters really start becoming a thing around the same time, like maybe like right after emos.
It's true, but like, hipster was never. It doesn't seem like it's the same demographic as emo, just like age-wise. Like the oldest emos seem like they were about the same age as the youngest hipsters. Which, I mean, obviously there's outliers on both sides of that, but.
But like, did you ever watch American Vandal on Netflix?
I have not.
So the second season, they've got this one character who is kind of like, he's in high school, and usually you associate hipsterism with being in like college at least, but he's sort of like, you can see this as like a proto hipster type, and like I feel like we've all known a kid who was like this, who's kind of, he was smart, but is also obnoxious and sort of like is really into like, not being in the mainstream in a very cultured way. Like I could see that as emerging as a separate subculture even among high schoolers. How many times are you going to fight this guy?
At least 3, apparently.
How many times do we got to teach you this lesson, old man? I think like we are kind of in a weird space with subcultures right now, because nerd has kind of ceased to exist as a meaningful concept anymore, since so many nerd interests have just become mainstream.
Right.
Like if you're into video games and superheroes, that doesn't put you outside the mainstream at all anymore.
You can't build a culture around that because that is just every culture. Like, being into video games is like being into music. Like, there's definitely specific genres of that medium that are subculture dominated, but as a medium, it is no longer a distinct thing. And you know,
it's like anime. The kid who was really into anime used to be kind of an outsider outcast, and now it's just kids are into anime. It doesn't, not like, it's usually like there'll be 1 or 2 animes every kid is into. It's not really a meaningful thing anymore. There's not the kid who's just into anime anymore.
Yeah, like a lot of people have watched Attack on Titan.
K-pop is completely mainstream. You're in a giant crevasse?
Maybe.
Interesting. I'm only getting more powerful. See, what happens when you try to repress Freudianism is you get the return of repressed.
But I mean, that assumes that psychology actually works that way, which I have some bad news for you.
See, what Sora is seeking is the primal scene. Do you know what the primal scene is?
Using my powers of prediction, I'm going to guess something dumb.
You're incorrect. The primal scene is when the child, usually as an actual infant in the parent's room in their crib, witnesses the parents having intercourse and then represses it. You try to think of it as like them having a physical fight, and that's when the father turns from a figure of trust into a rival for the mother's love. And
I'm pretty sure I was exactly right in my original assessment. That my confidence in that assessment is only growing.
well, I talked about it in my famous street study on the dreams of this one of my patients called the Wolfman, who has had dreams about a bunch of wolves outside his window watching him, which I interpreted as a manifestation of his repression of witnessing the primal scene. And you might say to me, but Freud, didn't he specifically say that that couldn't be possible because his crib was never in the same room as his parents' bedroom? He just slept in the same room as the nanny. At which point I would say, I don't know what you're talking about. How dare you?
I mean, I struggle to even find the connection there. Like, wolves are staring at him from outside his window. The fuck does that have to do with his parents having sex with each other while he was an infant in a crib? Who would do that, by the way? Was that common in your era?
You would have, it's just a baby. So you've got the crib in the room with the parents. It's just a baby, so people would have sex in the same room.
I can totally imagine someone doing that. I can imagine that happening at all.
And you might say to me, but Freud, number one, you can't build psychology on that because that basically doesn't happen at all anymore. And you might even say, number two, you can't build psychology on that because it used to be there would be one room in the house and there would be one bed in the house and everyone would sleep in the same bed. So not only would you regularly witness your parents having intercourse, you'd be in the same bed as it happened. I think I finally defeated Chamomile.
I mean, you just defeated yourself. I wasn't sure what else to add to that. Like, yes, those things you just said, I would in fact say them.
Why are we back in the Coliseum? Is this going to be a thing where you see all the worlds you've been to?
Yep.
Oh, you know what that might be then? You know what we could call that?
A penis?
Might it be the... You're close. Might it be the return of the repressed?
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's just trying to establish the stakes. You know. Like, if we fail here, then all of these worlds will eventually be destroyed, and all of our cool adventures will have been for nothing. But, you know, look at me trying to apply basic plot structure instead of psychotic psychoanalysis.
So I actually have a Freudian interpretation of the movie Us by Jordan Peele. Did you see Us?
I did not.
Yeah, we do actually have movies in the underworld, turns out. So the main villain, because all the villains are these 5 doppelgangers of these 4 doppelgangers, excuse me. Is it 4? Yeah, it's 4. Of the main characters, and everybody, it turns out, has a doppelganger. It starts attacking them one night. And you have this one character, Adelaide. She's the main character. And way back when she was a child, she actually encountered her doppelganger in a, like, funhouse type thing. She ran into her in, like, a Hall of Mirrors type thing. And after that, she had trauma, and she was selectively mute for a while. And even now, she's sort of, like, nervous. And leading up to the attack by the doppelgangers, she sees a lot of weird double imagery. Like, she sees a spider crawling by a plastic spider. She sees a guy holding a sign that says Jeremiah 11:11. Somebody throw the frisbee and it perfectly lands on a towel that has a bunch of polka dots on it. It lands perfectly on one of the polka dots. So she has repressed this trauma, and the doppelganger is a Freudian concept. It's a sort of a memento mori. It's a idea of the physical soul existing outside of the body. So it represents death. And Red, who is Adelaide's doppelganger, when Red attacks Adelaide, one of the things she mentions is she doesn't think that when the government made the clones, she's like, they were able to make a separate body, but it was always the same soul. They couldn't duplicate the soul. So it was one soul in 2 bodies. So all the clones are tethered to their original person that they're cloned out of. So they really are doppelgangers, but it turns out that Adelaide is not actually a regular person. She's actually one of the clones. When the original Adelaide went to the funhouse, she was attacked by one of the clones who actually replaced her. So Adelaide, who is actually a clone, repressed this, and it manifests itself in seeing all these doubles. And eventually the repressed returns in the forms of the clones attacking. And you can you can interpret it as being about privilege, but it's about privilege as a form of something we repress. It's the return of we don't see it. We repress seeing privilege. So one of the first people who dies when the clones attack is a mentally ill homeless man, and nobody notices.
I have completely lost track of what's supposed to represent what.
I'm sorry.
Like, okay, so the doppelgangers represent death, like the body without a soul, I guess, because it's one body with 2 souls, 2 bodies with 1 soul, and they also represent a repression of privilege, which is why the guy without privilege is the first victim of them?
Well, because the film Us, some people think it's about, I don't really know about this interpretation. Some people have it interpreted as it being about privilege, but I think if it is about privilege, is it about the way society treats privilege, which is by repressing and ignoring it?
I'm sure, like, I haven't even seen the movie, so I wouldn't know anyway. But
so the
having
first
that plot point of a homeless guy where, he gets killed by his doppelganger and no one even notices, that definitely feels like it has, at least for that plot beat, something to say about privilege. But, like, that doesn't mean the doppelganger specifically represents repressed privilege. They can just represent a calamity that could befall someone.
Well, they really represented sort of like the return of the repressed in general. Because there's sort of a Jungian thing where each doppelganger is sort of this exaggeration of their counterpart. So this one woman talks about plastic surgery, and when her doppelganger kills her, the doppelganger goes into her room and cuts into her own face.
Like you do when you're an evil doppelganger.
But you can see that the thing that happened in the funhouse when Adelaide was a child is a trauma that she has repressed, and it eventually manifests itself. Since Adelaide's doppelganger is the only one able to talk. It's the return of the repressed. Because also the doppelgangers come out from under the ground, and the underground is sort of can be symbolic of the subconscious.
Yeah, I buy that.
The privilege thing was just sort of a response to people wanting to interpret it as being about privilege. I think it's more just about oppression, the return of the repressed, and psychic trauma.
Yeah, that seems reasonable to me. Again, it would probably help if I had seen it. So.
But it's also very Jungian, since they're the shadow selves.
Yeah, I mean, the shadow self is really useful for fiction. It's a very compelling idea.
Like me, Jung was also an amazing psychologist.
I mean, he fucked it up less than you. Can we get his ghost on? Like...
Let me see. No. I could get you the ghost of Anna Freud, and we can talk about child psychology.
I'm thinking it over. Oh yeah, by the way, Winnie the Pooh is also in this game.
He was an optional boss, I'm assuming.
He goes insane and fuses with Genova, then summons a meteor to shatter the planet. But, the boss is kind of underwhelming. He gets stuck in Rabbit's hole. But yeah, Winnie the Pooh is just a bunch of mini games, most of which aren't very fun. So...
and not really a benefit from playing them. It's kind of like I replayed Breath of Fire 3, and there's a mini game where you build a village for a bunch of fairies, but it doesn't really start to benefit you until like the very end of the game, and at that point, the benefits are not worth it. Like, you already have all the stuff it can offer you, so it's like, all right, that was a waste of time.
Yeah. It's kind of like how the prize for completing the hardest boss or dungeon in the game will be a weapon that is now useless because you have already overcome every challenge. Like there's
like
nothing
a
you
Final
can use
Fantasy 7 or 8 quest that somebody like just figured out like the past couple of years that was so complicated, and the prize was like a potion or something.
Going backwards. Okay. Blue lights go forwards. Aha! This is promising.
You just found an abyss to jump into.
Yes, because I'm descending into the subconscious.
And you're about to do battle with the primordial mother.
Guess again.
Or Chernobog from Fantasia.
So come on, Freud. Tell me how this is the primordial mother.
It's actually the primordial father.
So do you have a third option for when something isn't clearly gender-coded either way? Or do you just stick with the mother so that you can claim that they want to have sex with their mother?
So Is there any reason Chernobog has shown up? Like, is it just because it's a Disney character? Is he a Heartless?
That seems to be the implication. I mean, it's not like he has a backstory to be contradicted by that, so...
I mean, I guess they had to fit Fantasia in somehow. He's, like, pretty dark for a Disney character, like a straight-up demon. Especially from, like, it was, like, the 40s, I think.
What
was Fantasia made?
I think the 40s is right. Might have been the 30s, even. But 1940, I think, might be Fantasia. It's in that Snow White Dumbo era.
We do actually have Google in the underworld, so let me check. Yeah, 1940 exactly.
And Chernobog is another big, giant, bulky monster, and I hate fighting these, so, you know, I'm just going to face roll them.
It's basically like Ursula.
Ursula, Maleficent. Like, fighting Riku is a ton of fun. He's this one really fast guy.
So I assume we have to fight Xehanort again?
Always. The end stretch of every Kingdom Hearts game is 4 different battles against Xehanort.
Amazing. I think they should have just had the final battle be Chernobog.
There is definitely a strong theme of descent in this final dungeon, which is a very Jungian theme.
How dare you?
Oh
and
boy!
This thing again.
I can glide fast, but what I need to be able to do is to jump higher so I can get on this thing's back properly. You know, a lot of people who were scared of Chernobog as a kid got, like, cathartic revenge via Kingdom Hearts.
That was a terrifying sequence in a animated movie. The equivalent in Fantasia 2000 was the Firebird Suite, which is a pretty good animated sequence, but the Firebird was not as intimidating as Chernobog.
I don't think I ever saw Fantasia 2000.
No one did.
Yeah, I mean, Fantasia was an experimental concept, and it didn't really catch on. You know, the whole series of musical vignettes did not go on to become a thing the way the Disney Princess movie did.
They were gonna have Salvador Dali work on one.
So, there is a Heartless emblem door we're trying to unseal here. We got the first bit out by killing the Behemoth. Second bit is just waves and waves of Heartless. So do you think the third bit is going to be even more waves of Heartless? Or another Behemoth?
It's going to be both. Am I right?
No, it is just more waves of Heartless.
Oh. Now they're little angel Heartless, which proves that the Heartless are the good guys, right?
Clearly, when have angels ever been evil? You would never catch an angel doing something like, you know, going on some kind of psycho killing spree, slaughtering the firstborn child of an entire nation. That would be ridiculous. This, by the way, is the recommended farming location for materials that you can forge that super keyblade.
But it's not like the game is hard enough for that to be worth it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like 1 point stronger than the Oblivion. It does also give you a magic boost instead of a magic downgrade. I'm pretty sure when I was a kid I beat Sephiroth with Oblivion, though.
Well, and obviously Riku's love for Sora was strongest.
So, you know, funny enough, the 3 best Keyblades in the game besides Ultima Weapon, which is a very gamey thing, but there is Oblivion has the highest attack power. Oathkeeper has the highest attack power of all the Keyblades that give you extra mana. And the Keyblade that Bell gives you is balanced between them.
Huh.
So apparently Bell is, you know, your strongest friend right there alongside Riku and Kairi.
Yeah, and you've had all of 0 interactions with her.
Right? It is like a beast, a rose rather themed thing, so it could be Beast's Keyblade instead, but...
So Sora was a furry this whole time.
I mean, he does hang out with 2 anthropomorphic animals.
So we're on Pirates of the Caribbean world now?
Is this my island?
No, Sora. It's Pirates of the Caribbean world. Weren't you listening?
We're about to fight Captain Jack Sparrow. He was behind it the whole time.